what happened whenever we decided to really streamline our kickoff process is we took an audit of all of the projects that we've really ever done and tried to understand, okay, what access did we end up needing at the end of the day at these clients? What was our most successful discovery calls? Who was on the calls as well? Who were the key people that needed to be on those calls? And even what didn't go well. So if we had projects, there was someone left out of an earlier meeting that if they had been involved from the beginning, it could have streamlined the whole onboarding process. We looked at that too and tried to understand and piece together like what's everything that needs to go right during the first 60 to 90 days to streamline this onboarding as much as possible and get value the quickest that we can.
Yeah, and I hope these are like lessons people are listening to and saying like, oh, we could apply that and do a retrospective, just meaning like, let's take a look at what was successful or not successful in any project in a business, because you're going to have new projects. Businesses are always evolving and always working on new technologies, service lines, etc. Hey everybody, this is Jason Brill, founder of Parable Associates. And on the call today, we'll be talking about one of the most important parts of building a relationship with a vendor, which is really the onboarding part. And here at Parable Associates, we spent a ton of time making sure that this process is built, makes it as easy as it possibly can be for our customers. So on the call today, really the person who has helped build that infrastructure and design it, our Director of Operations, Wesley Layton. Wesley, thanks for taking the time today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
All right, so let's jump right into the process itself. So where the starting point of this discussion is really we've made a new relationship. We have the proper contracts in place, and now we're ready to, or getting ready to actually set off kickoff call as a consultant, as a solution provider through our services. So what are the first things that you're doing to help onboard this customer? What does it look like, and why do we have it built that way?
From the first step of once we start a new partnership, we're already working behind the scenes to get everything into place to make sure that's a smooth onboarding. I think why it's so important is that there's so many friction points that you can hit whenever you're starting to work with a vendor. And each of those friction points just delays the time to value that vendor is able to provide. And so at Parable Associates, we want to be able to provide value the quickest that we can to the community that we work with. As you know, if you're watching this and you're in the healthcare community, every day matters for a lot of these metrics. You know, every day that you don't have data is another day that you're going by and it's a loss in your ability to optimize those operations. So the whole name of the game with what we do is trying to make it as smooth, frictionless as possible, and also a low lift from our clients, because we want this to be minimally invasive. Everyone's really busy, and we recognize that and want to be able to take as much as we can off of the mental load, whoever we're working with.
Onboarding a new vendor shouldn't be a new job. At least that's how we view it. Yeah. I mean, and the timing part's really critical too, because for most contracts, when you're bringing in a new service provider, you've already spent so much time in the sales process, maybe even doing an RFP, talking to multiple vendors. And then the contracting and redlining process, it could be multiple months that you've said, hey, we have this need, to the point that you've already said, okay, we've completely signed off on everything. So the timing part's critical too, of driving value as quickly as you can right out of the gate. So I think that's an important point too, of being one of the reasons why having processes like this is important. All right, so
Absolutely.
So what are some of those processes and things to expect when setting up a new relationship?
Yeah. So obviously we want to move as quickly as we can, but there's also a lot of really important stuff that has to happen in the onboarding, and things that you don't want to skip either. You want to be diligent with. Like you said, kind of the first step is the kickoff call. We're actually already preparing things by the time we get to that kickoff call so that we're making the best use of our time. So the way that we handle a kickoff call is that we have everybody on from the Parable side that is going to be interacting with that client on a day-to-day basis. So that team typically looks like a project manager who's like the account manager for them, director level leadership like myself and our director of technology, Jason, also on the call kind of as the founder and having that handoff typically from the sales process to the actual project. So all these different people are on the call, as well as like operations consultants. The point is that everyone that needs to be on the call, that needs to meet the client to be able to start getting things running, is already there from day one, so that we get all of that out of the way and that we we can go ahead and move forward as a cohesive team together with that client.
You talked about an operational leader. You talked about a technical leader, project management, having all those skill sets in the room. There's this concept of this collective brain that you really get a lot of different skills and talents when you work with a service provider. So just one critical thing to think about is data and analytics is complex and it takes a team. And so you need to have different skill sets brought to the table to execute and roll something out. So really critical that you're operating as a team and communicating effectively. So having everybody in the room day one is really important.
Definitely. And it's not just on our side that we're bringing everybody into the room together as well, but also like the client representatives that are from the IT teams, but also the business teams. Really, the idea is let's get, like you said, collective brain. Let's get everybody in the room together. We all work better kind of together. I think one of the things that we do well as Parable is bridge that IT and business gap ourselves, but also help our clients be able to bridge it within their organizations too. So bringing those people together on the kickoff call is kind of the first step. What we cover on that call, like I said, it's not necessarily only a like rally the troops and meet everybody. It's not just a meet and greet, although that is part of it. We also already have IT checklist of the access that we need that gets sent out directly after the call to whoever the IT leader is. And we have been able to really hone what we are going to need from an access standpoint from all of the clients that we've worked with over the years. And especially in the healthcare domain, knowing the specific roles and permissions that we need to ask for that are kind of the minimum amount for us to do our job and adhere to best practices within compliance. So that's one key piece is the IT checklist. And then we also have discovery documents that lay out kind of the next planned meetings that we have with our clients. One of those is the IT discovery, again, kind of going over access requirements, understanding the current IT architecture landscape, what kind of systems are in place, what integrations work together, and just getting a lay of the land there. We have a whole document that templates out who needs to be on that call, what we're going to cover on the call, everything that's involved. And then on the operations side, again, kind of IT and operations, not the same discovery call, but going over both of this on the kickoff call, we have an operations discovery document and that lists out who needs to be there, what we're going to cover on that call, and what the importance of it is. And that one's really for being able to dive into workflows and understand like really how is the business operating, especially within the context of the systems that they use. Because then we can tie that back to the conversations we're having with IT to know what buttons they're pushing on the front end of the PM and then where that data is being stored and how it integrates with other systems that the practice is using.
One, you have the checklist. So making it as easy as possible for the client to know who to bring into the room on their side, what the topic of conversation is so they can be prepared with. We've had some clients that have their whole architecture documented and written out, and others just give us a list of vendors that they use or technologies that they use on a daily basis. So we've seen both ends of it, but I think having that really helps accelerate the process, but also just the clarity it provides is really beneficial to building that initial relationship and level of professionalism. But I don't imagine this was an overnight process building these out. So if you could, like a little bit of context on like how you actually built out the checklist or where that came from.
Yeah. So, like I said, it was really years of work, I would say, culminated. So, kind of what happened whenever we decided to really streamline our kickoff process is we took an audit of all of the projects that we've really ever done and tried to understand, okay, what access did we end up needing at the end of the day at these clients? What was our most successful discovery calls? Like what was talked about on those discovery calls? Who was on the calls as well? Who were the key people that needed to be on those calls? And even what didn't go well. So if we had project, there was someone left out of an earlier meeting that if they had been involved from the beginning, it could have streamlined the whole onboarding process. We looked at that too and tried to understand and piece together like what's everything that needs to go right during the first 60 to 90 days to streamline this onboarding as much as possible and get value the quickest that we can.
Yeah. And I hope these are like lessons people are listening to and saying like, oh, we could apply that and do a retrospective, just meaning like, let's take a look at what was successful or not successful in any project. in a business because you're going to have new projects. Businesses are always evolving and always working on new technologies, service lines, et cetera. And so it's just a good practice in general to have that moment of reflection, what didn't work well and what should have happened differently. And then also what did work well, because you mentioned that too, and really seeking to understand, not just taking it at face value and say, this worked really well, let's just do it again. But like, why did it work well, and dissecting it, I think, is a really critical part of that development.
Doing that retrospective is like, we still do that all the time. So like our most recent integration or kind of feature in our onboarding process, I'd call it, is a client portal that we created that has like everything that we're talking about. It has the IT discovery agenda, the ops discovery agenda, the IT checklist, a link to schedule time with your project team. Like every single thing that you would possibly need in the onboarding process is all in that client portal. And that's because we looked at our most recent clients that we kicked off, and we realized we've got all these really good resources made now, but it's like a million links that are files that they have to go through. Yeah. So like, where did I save my IT discovery call? Where did I save the IT checklist? How do I schedule a meeting? We have to go back and forth on times and try to find a common time that works. So we put it all into a portal and gave like a meeting schedule option, has all of your agenda and everything in there. Again, just to try to reduce the load of onboarding the vendor, in this case us, with the org. But yeah, that's just an example of, we had made a lot of progress, but look back, still there was something to improve, continue to improve it. So
yeah. As somebody who's purchased solutions for our own business and also been in healthcare forever, I think the normal workflow to expect, which is not optimal, the normal workflow to expect is 100 different emails with a PDF of a checklist or a request list from one person and a different consultant coming in and saying, well, I need this data set. And there's folders all over the place you have to link out. So having one bookmark, developing a portal with one bookmark that has a calendar invite link, that has where you store all your documents, it's a secure environment for sharing and collaborating, even for the onboarding, checklists and everything. Like, it's just makes it so much easier for the client. You can bookmark one website and be set and have it all centralized. So that's like you said, it's a huge advancement in how to deliver a high level of service. So now that you have the kickoff calls, you've got the discovery things, you've been getting that information and feedback, you've been grouping different departments together. So a ton of massive progress. What does life look like for customers after that point? How do you transition from that discovery into more of, okay, we're in the weeds, we're building this thing out now. What does the next 30, 60, 90 look like?
Transition from discovery to like actually implementing the project is kind of, I guess, where the rubber hits the road. And the way that we do that is typically weekly calls. We always have a weekly update call. And the weekly update call almost always has everyone that was on that kickoff call, which is all the most important stakeholders to make sure that this thing gets done. And on those calls, we're reviewing progress, demoing our most recent dashboards, and then also talking about blockers or risks to the project. And awesome part about having everyone on that call is if there's a risk or a blocker on the IT side, they're on the call right there. So we have them kind of embedded in the project. We don't have to go through any red tape or try to go through emails, raising a ticket. They're a part of the project. They're embedded into it. They want to see the success through as well. And then if there's an operations issue or question or clarification needed, they're on the call as well. So everyone's kind of working together to make sure that it gets done. So that's how we do the status updates, which is really kind of like the lifeblood of the project. I would say, like it's the backbone of the project, I would say, and keeps everything running smoothly. Way in which we implement for the first 60 to 90 days stems off of that discovery. So typically in the discovery, there's probably 2 to 3 really big initiatives that come out of that are like, here's the most important things that we get done. And then everything else is kind of down here and we'll prioritize it later. And if you get these 2 to 3 things done, then it provides way more benefit to the business than if you were to focus on everything down here. So with that, the first step after the discovery is creating a project plan that can implement those things. awesome part of our implementation is we have accelerators with a lot of the platforms that are out there in healthcare. So we can typically implement 20 plus reports within 30 to 60 days, depending on the system. And so that means that probably some of the things that are the biggest problem would already be covered within those 30 to 60 days. But we can give some extra attention to those main focuses that of the business and make sure we really customize those to the practice, because our accelerators are just the starting point. They're not kind of the finish line. So we're able to really build the customization into that in the first onboarding process.
Further emphasizing the speed to value, right? So and to be selective over what those accelerators are, to know that these are some of the highest value, most frequently requested reports, data models, et cetera, to get kickstarted. So tell me a little bit about, so let's go through the accelerators. Hey, 30 days have passed. We have some of these accelerators up and running. You mentioned customization. How does a client get a dashboard customized or a data model customized? You have an accelerator we got from point A to point B, but what does that look like?
Kind of the most streamlined way is that we actually have a ticket link that creates a task for us in our project management software. So if there is like an enhancement that a client wants or further customization, all they have to do is go in, submit a ticket and say, I need this measure changed. I want DSO calculated in a different way, whatever it might be, to kind of alter our logic. That ticket gets created and we're immediately able to pick it up and work on it. That's one way. And then the other way is a lot of times it happens kind of naturally on the status update calls, because on those calls, we're also just discussing the success of the dashboards that we have out there so far. So typically, we build in a little bit of time to those meetings to just say, how are the reports going? How are you getting good value out of them? Is there anything that you would want changed? Is there anything that's like not as easy to pull as you want it to be? We're able to kind of bring it up and talk about it on those calls. And that's another benefit. It's only a 30-minute call once a week, but we're able to knock out so many different things on that call.
Just from my own experience working with other vendors and solutions, I feel like there's usually some, I don't want to call it churn, but some, let's say, leadership that stops joining the meetings. Like they're self kind of electing or volunteering, like, I'm not going to join this every Friday. How do you kind of fight against that and keep attendance high and quality of those meetings high when you're doing a status update?
Yeah, good question. So, I think the biggest reason why leadership would stop joining a meeting and why I've seen it happen is because that meeting's not valuable. So like the best way to have everyone joining the meeting that's key on that meeting is, as the host of that meeting, as the organizer, you have to make sure that every week that you're bringing value to the people on those calls. So like I said, it's not just necessarily a project update of saying, here's an update of where we're at. And, that could be an email, but the way that you provide value and get everybody to remain engaged, even as it kind of goes on, is by solutioning together, asking how is the success of the dashboards going? Are people using it? What could be better about it? Coming up with proactive ideas as well. That kind of goes in with the solutioning part, but thinking next step. So we're always doing all of those on the update calls as well.
It's critical in like the partnership and also the communication long term. So if this is the onboarding and then the first 30, 60, 90 of implementation and some of the customization, from the highest level, what does it look like after that? Do these meetings still go on? How does communication proceed? How do you stay prioritized? What does that world look like?
Yeah. So I would say this is where it becomes a little bit of a it depends situation. Like the onboarding is extremely, like we know what works best for onboarding. That's a fact. For what works best long term depends a little bit on the practice and also what our engagement looks like. We've seen with some clients that are super data hungry, constant custom requests, we've kept a weekly status meeting going for years. People join and get a lot of value out of them still, and it's a good meeting to have. For some clients, it might be bi-weekly, where it's just every other week, and we're hitting the high points. We're making sure we're all in sync, and then on the off weeks, if we need something, we're emailing or we're setting up working sessions if needed and things like that. Yeah, it depends a little bit. There's always got to be some kind of recurring touch base though. And it's the same story as during implementation. You got to be providing value. That's how we see it, at least, is we always want to be providing value no matter how long the engagement's been going.
Yeah, awesome. I think that's what keeps people, for years, like you had mentioned. As long as you're providing value, people will attend and be a part of the process. Awesome. Well, I think that kind of brings us to a conclusion for the point of like onboarding and so on. I guess my last question is, if you were to have any words of advice for somebody building out a process like this, or to speed them up throughout that process, how would you coach them or mentor them to build their own onboarding or building client relationship at the onset? What are the things that they should be looking at or building out now, or solutions they should be looking into?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, really, I think the best advice I can give is just like that retrospective and audit that we did. What worked the best when you did it, and what also did not work well? Because if you can know those two things, then you can probably piece together the best onboarding experience that you can provide. And then again, like if I think of onboarding, the two things that matter the most is the time to value that you can provide, and a frictionless, low overhead experience for the client as well. So if you keep those two things in mind as kind of like the North Star, then I think you can provide a good onboarding experience.
Very good, very insightful, and I think has some really good application for others that are trying to build a successful process themselves. So thanks for your time today, Wesley. For those that are interested in going through this process or learning more about what onboarding would look like and want to reach out to Parable Associates, you can find us online on LinkedIn, Parable Associates, Parable, or parableassociates.com. Feel free to reach out, set up a meeting, and we can talk about how analytics could really help you grow and scale your practice. Thanks for your time today.
Awesome. Thanks.